I guess if you're compatible with what Dave Coldwell teaches as a coach, you can go train with him, but that wouldn't be the first guy in the UK I suggest you go train with. I wouldn't advise any British fighters to train with Dave Coldwell. I just wouldn't advise them. Dave used to be a journeyman when he was a boxer, very defensive, but not defensive where he's going to transition that into offense. He was negatively defensive, practically losing all of his fights. Never really went for the kill, didn't really know how to, didn't have the power. He was trained by Brendan Ingle. That's who got him into the game. And that Winkerbank style of being very elusive is what he used. But there was no offense there. Like, you know, Harold Graham transitioned into offense and so did Nassim Hamed. And even Johnny Nelson, like after a poor start to his career, he learned how to balance that out. Now, the Winkerbank style has its critics. Tony Bellew was criticizing it the other day, how it hasn't adapted after Kid Galahad got knocked out, you know, pulling back from punches and taking chances like that. And ironically, even after Tony Bellew observed that, shortly after his world title bid at light heavy, the losing title bid to Adonis Stevenson, he hooked up with Dave Coldwell to train him for the rest of his career in 2014. I'm not saying he's the worst coach. I mean, they won the cruiserweight title against Lalenga, a fight that I didn't think Bellew was going to win. So he has some ability. But to me, Coldwell was the extreme of the Winkerbank style. Coldwell was more like one of the Nobby Nobbs fighters, Norman Nobbs. Some of you may not know of Norman Nobbs. He was a trainer and manager from the Midlands. He was based in Birmingham. He had fighters like Howard Clark, Brian Coleman, Jason Nisbet, Art Mivu. He's worked with the likes of Peter Buckley. And basically, he used to lease out journeymen to fill out cards, small hall cards, maybe a Frank Warren card or a Barry Hearn card or a Frank Maloney card or any of them cards there. And basically, they went in there to pad out prospects and contenders' records. That's what they were brought in for. They'd come in at late notice and they basically fought to avoid cuts and knockouts so they wouldn't have suspensions or have to wait months for cuts to heal up before they could box again. Norman Nobbs himself referred to his stable as Losers Unlimited. You see, the concept of what stable he constructed, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it was a stroke of genius. Yeah, let's just get a whole load of journeymen. When you ain't got a fighter to fill out that card, to fill out that fight, I'll supply. It's actually a very good idea as a business idea. It's naming it Losers Unlimited, though. Like, there's no other country you could think of that would do that apart from England. Losers Unlimited. It was the same with Eddie the Eagle Edwards. I remember in the 80s, every time you picked up a tabloid, a red top, this guy's on the front page. He was a skier, a ski jumper. He literally used to fall off the ramp. He didn't even jump. And he became one of the most decorated sports stars in the country. Eddie the Eagle Edwards. And there was a lot of people outside of the UK who didn't get it. They didn't understand it. And before Clever Clogs was to say something, well, Derek loses all the time. You know, fucking goofballs. Derek has a winning record. Let's start there. Derek fights at top level and is competitive. Eddie the Eagle is not competitive. Derek's been Commonwealth, European and British champion. You do realise that. By telling Derek Chisora what his limits are, he's inadvertently telling us his limits as a trainer, Dave Coldwell. I'm not talking about his size, because he's a small dude, but mentally he thinks very small. Yeah, he's had success with a few fighters, like Tony Bellew, but for the most part, he'll crush you. He doesn't believe in himself, so how's he going to believe in you? Derek Chisora just said, I didn't even know Dave said that he won't train me if I fight Wilder. And he said, I'm a little annoyed that he said that. And he said, yeah, he's talked himself out of that payday. Derek Chisora said, I don't fear the Bronze Bomber. If I have to fight Wilder, I'll fight him. You don't try and coach that out of somebody. You don't try and coach fear into your boxer. That's the last thing you do. Here's the issue. He's specifically saying he won't train him to fight Deontay Wilder. So that means he'll keep on training him to fight the likes of Hughie Fury. What sense does that make? Does he believe that Hugh Fury's not going to try and knock Derek out if he gets the opportunity? And look, with this heightened sense of fear that David is bringing to Derek's energy, it's just going to embolden somebody like Huey. And if he senses any apprehension in Derek, he's going to knock him out, whether he punches hard as Wilder or not. You've just advertised to everybody that you've got a very vulnerable heavyweight in your stable. Who the fuck does that? What, you think only Deontay Wilder heard what you said? I don't see how Derek can go any further with Dave Coldwell after what he said. He didn't even have the sense to tell Derek in private what he thought.
So you've made it clear, and I think that's one of the main things, really, and something I explored a bit with Dave. The fact is, Derek Chisora's value isn't his win-loss record. It's what he adds when he's inside the ring.
Listen, I love Dave, but by him saying things like that, it pisses me off. It's just a bit annoying. He's saying that. I didn't even know he said that, to be honest with you. So I'm a bit annoyed about that. I love Dave, but, this is why some of us live in the fast lane. The Eagles say life in the fast lane, baby. This is why, AJ, Tyson Fury, Dylan White. This is why we live in the fast lane, because nobody can live in this fast lane. If you're weak-minded, to be honest with you, and you haven't got a heart, this game is for guys who got heart. We live in the fast lane. You look at that fight. Luis Ortiz. At 42, he knocked out a young guy. So what's the problem? The boy might tell him he's 42, but in his mind he's like 18 years old. I keep telling people, yes, it might be old, but so I like to live on the fast lane. That is it. So I fight anybody, wherever and when. I don't care.
You'll be aware that people have said that maybe it is a time to call it a day. Do you respect that opinion at all?
Hey, that's them. That is them, 100%. That is them. Those are the guys who still ask money from their mothers. If you haven't said, "Oh no, it's time for you to," I think it's time to call it off, because he wants to be that guy who said, "I told you you should call it off." He's the same guy who's going, "Oh mama, I haven't paid my my cards. Is there any chance you can borrow me some money?" Those are the guys. A real man who don't say things like, real man like, "Yeah, what a great fight. I want to see another one." Real men say that. A real lion say that. Little cubs will be like, "Oh, this is too hard. I can't do this. Let's not do this anymore." Real men, real fighters will be like, "Forget that, man. We're going again." So all those guys, and one of the guys was Steve Buns. Am I lying?
How long do you think you've got left? And do you think you'd know when the right time was?
Yeah. And you would know. You would know. The day I walk out, everybody would know it's the right time. You would know. The whole way I'll build up the fight, everybody would know.
But the way you looked, especially at the weigh-in, the shape you got yourself into, are you sort of thinking that from a physical point of view, you're not slowing down at all?
Oh, I have to give a shout out to Ruben, Dan, Science Boxing, and Dave Coldwell. They instructed a great plan for that, for me to look good and still have so much energy at this age. It was great. I enjoyed it. I love training. I love fighting.
Angelo Dundee decided that Ali was better off with him in his corner, even though he didn't want Ali to come back after he retired. He said, if he's going to fight, I'm going to be in his corner. Ali had a lot of the fundamentals down by the time Angelo got to him. Dundee always said fighters change trainers the way most people change their shorts. He never tried to turn Ali into something that he was not. And Dave Coldwell doesn't realize what he's doing. He's trying to change Derek Chisora. Derek isn't what you would call a technical counterpuncher. He's a fighter. He's not a long-range jabber and mover. Derek fights on heart, emotion, and guts. If you tell Derek you can't fight this guy and that guy there, you're killing the fighter, literally. You can't do that. I'm not saying he's just some barbaric animal. He has a skill set, obviously, but he's a fighter. And I'm not saying you have to be as crazy as him. You have to understand Derek, though. Sometimes you might have to be the counter to Derek's craziness to say, yo, Derek, calm down. Listen, Dave Coldwell didn't just set limits or try to set limits on Derek Chisora. He set limits on himself. Because you now know that if you get a clean bill of health from the British Boxing Board of Control, that means you're ready to fight. But Dave might be telling you, oh, you can't fight that guy when you're bang up for it. So that means Dave himself is limited as a coach because he doesn't have either the courage or the foresight to listen to his fighter when his fighter says, look, I see something I can work on and beat Wilder with. He's not listening to that. He can't hear it. He's writing it off, which means he's not prepared to go that extra mile as a coach and actually see if there's any validity in what his fighter is saying. Hey, you know something? He's right. If we do this and do that, we can neutralize Wilder's power. Perhaps. There's no guarantees. Perhaps. So he's limited as a coach because there's only so far he will go. No matter what, you've got to be prepared to go as far as the fighter. It's just like if you're going into battle. The general can't lead his battalion or his troops successfully unless they believe, yo, he has as much heart or maybe even more than us. If he sends us down there, that means he would do it himself. And if that general can't convince them of that, he's got troubles. I said at the start, nobody trained with him. Maybe if you're more compatible to that, to somebody telling you your limits and stuff like that, then you can go there. But no, not as a chief second for me. And this country really needs to shake up and shake out of a lot of old practices and attitudes. See, a lot of people wonder, where does this passion come from, Beats? Why do you get so passionate? Because I've studied my topic. I don't say that likely to be a braggart, but I actually have studied and I know my topic. I know the history. I know the mentalities. You got Jim Wicks, Henry Cooper's manager. Now, Wicks let Henry fight Ali twice, once in a non-title fight and once in a title fight. And they actually nearly knocked Ali out in the first fight. But you asked Jim Wicks to put Henry Cooper in the ring with Sonny Liston. He said, out of his own mouth, when asked if he would allow Henry to fight the brutal Sonny Liston for the world title, a horrified Jim said, I wouldn't allow my Henry to walk in the same street as him. That's what he said. This is what he said. Remember, conditioning is not just the body and the physical, it's the mental. If this is how our best heavyweight, the British champion, the Commonwealth, and European, if this is how we're conditioning him to compete at world level, what's it going to do to the other guys who ain't as good as Henry? Do you think they're going to want to fight Sonny Liston? I'm not a nationalist either. I'm not big on none of this shit here. But this is not just about Derek Chisora. It's about the talented kid, the next upcoming kid who's got to take on the next badass, big talking American confident, who's got the knockout streak like Wilder. How do we coach him mentally? Because what people don't understand, right? That mental coaching is a bigger skill than the physical coaching. Because without the mental, you go nowhere. Henry Cooper got knocked out by Floyd Patterson as well. And then he carried on and he was still defending his British Commonwealth and European titles and whatever. Yeah, top dog, made a bucket load of money. Ali lost his license because of the Vietnam War. Joe Frazier won the New York State Athletic Commission title. Ali's sparring partner, Jimmy Ellis, he won the WBA tournament in Ali's absence and beat some good names. He started as a middleweight, Jimmy Ellis. He had the WBA title. Joe Frazier had the New York State Athletic Commission. The WBC title was out of commission right now. Cooper and Jim Wicks, they was never going to fight Joe Frazier. No way. Frazier came in there looking to kill people. They'll fight Ali because Ali wasn't as vicious as them guys. He was more finesse. But he was never going to fight Joe Frazier. You know what they tried to fight? They tried to fight Jimmy Ellis because he was a middleweight for the WBA title. But at the time, the British Boxing Board of Control didn't recognise the WBA title. I think Cooper got injured and, it fizzled out. It didn't happen. But that's who they went for. They tried to win the title that way by fighting the middleweight Jimmy Ellis. Can you see the mentality? And I've done some research. Cooper and Jim Wicks, they turned down fights with sluggers like Chuvalo, Oscar Bonavena, but Cooper wasn't mad. He was very fond of Jim Wicks. After his career, he said, yeah, he looked after me. This is what a manager was all about. So he was glad for that. But it's not the mentality of a world beater. Jimmy Ellis fought everybody. Jimmy Ellis fought Frazier. He fought Ali, Bonavena, fought Joe Frazier twice. Joe Bugner, lost on points to him. He fought Ernie Shavers and had Shavers in bad trouble. He got knocked out in one. But he was going after Shavers like a crazy person. This middleweight. He fought Chuvalo, beat George Chuvalo, Floyd Patterson, Leotis Martin. He wasn't scared. He didn't have that mentality. He didn't grow up like Henry Cooper. It was a totally different brand of mental conditioning. If they were putting up a nice purse for Jimmy Ellis to fight Sonny Liston, what do you think Jimmy Ellis would do? Do you think Jimmy Ellis would have, and his manager would be saying, we'll let him on the same side of the street? No, they would go in the gym and prepare. This is their job. You are a world-ranked heavyweight, a world champion. Act accordingly. At middleweight, he fought the likes of Georgie Benton, Reuben Hurricane Carter, Henry Hank, Holly Mims, and he was Ali's chief sparring partner, this middleweight. And he eventually won the title, albeit in Ali's absence. And no, he was never going to beat the big punchers like a Joe Frazier. No way. He was knocked out brutally by Frazier, but he was competitive. And this is what Derek Chisora is about, man. Yeah? Our boxers, or boxers in general, can learn so much from Derek Chisora. So much. It's that mentality. It's the mentality. I'm not afraid of the Bronze Bomber. You are. Why do you think Deontay Wilder wasn't interested in fighting the likes of Derek Chisora years ago? Why do you think Emmanuel Stewart pulled Vladimir Klitschko out of the fight? The rumor was that he just didn't like the look in Derek's eyes. And he called it off. I've never understood it. And I'm not even a pugilist, but I've never understood how regular citizens, and I'm a regular citizen, how you try to talk about boxers like they're like you. Like they think anything like you would think. That's why I was one of the first YouTubers, I know this for sure, who came out and said, I do not promote telling boxers when to retire. I've never heard no one say it before I did on YouTube, and I remember it being a very unpopular position with a lot of people, but I stick by that today. Anyone looking for happy endings for boxers, a lot of the predicaments boxers find themselves in are inevitable outcomes of such a dangerous profession to take up. So all this, you do this and have a happy outcome is not a reality for the vast majority of boxers who stay in it long. A Deontay Wilder fight could be worth a couple of million, perhaps, for Derek Chisora. Derek wants to make that money while he can make it. Derek said he'll stop when he can't speak properly. And don't get me wrong, if the British Boxing Board of Control come back and say, yo, Derek, we can't give you a license with these medicals. You are not neurologically or physically sound enough to fight. Fair enough, it's over. I don't argue with that. That's clinical diagnosis. I'm not going to argue with that. But all this, don't fight Wilder when this guy fought Klitschko in, under 18 fights or something? How much fights did he have? And barely had no amateur background. You're telling him what his limits are. Some of you need to fall back. And now Chisora's come out and said, I'm pissed off with Dave and I'm annoyed about what he said. You see, I was prepared to back down a little from my position if Derek came out and said, he's right. He's right. I feel vindicated. Regardless if he fights Wilder and gets knocked out in 20 seconds, I'm totally vindicated. Totally, 100%. Because at the end of the day, you guys are just consumers like I am. You can't dictate the limits of how far Derek Chisora can go. You can't. He's the boxer. Without Derek, you have nothing. You just watch a blank screen, an empty canvas with no punches being thrown. Unless you're going to go in there yourself, which you're not going to do. And neither am I. You see, the winning and losing thing is not a good argument to start your debate. It really isn't. Joseph Parker hinting at Derek, I want you to retire, Derek. No, what you're trying to do is accentuate your win. So people can go around saying, yeah, you retired Derek. Look, He had his opportunity to fight Hrgovic, and he didn't take it. I'd rather see Joseph retire than Derek Chisora. I get way more out of boxing from Derek Chisora than Joseph Parker. You know who's really glad that you're coming out saying that there's no way Derek should fight Dillian? You know who's really glad? Deontay Wilder. Take the pressure off him. You know who else is really glad? Is the Wilder fan base, because they hate being challenged by fighters who really want to fight Deontay Wilder. They just can't stand it. Like all these British motherfuckers who just hate Dillian. And that's fair enough, but it's no point in fighting Dillian anyway. There's no point in getting the title shot. He's going to get knocked out. That was your opinion. Dillian didn't believe that. Dillian was confident. Dillian was going to go in there and he was going to train and prepare for Deontay Wilder. I was asking the question, I wonder if he can do that catch and shoot on Deontay Wilder's right hand. Could he pull that off? Not if he listened to you guys who were saying that he's got no chance. No, he'd get knocked out in a second. But it takes a confident man to pull that move off. We're in an era where we have British heavyweights who are confident they can do this. And now we've got these negative British guys who claim they're boxing fans who are trying to knock the confidence out of our fighters for some reason. They used to call the British heavyweights horizontal heavyweights. Yeah, that's what the Americans titled our heavyweights. They don't do that right now. Because whether it's Tyson Fury or Anthony Joshua, for the last 6 years, we've controlled the division. We've got mandatory contenders like Dillian. Like the disrespect some of these British motherfuckers have for Dillian. Oh, you got knocked out by Povetkin. Didn't he avenge the loss? Isn't boxing about overcoming obstacles? Isn't he mandatory contender right now? Are Hasim Rahman or Oliver McCall any better than Alexander Povetkin? No, they're all about the same level. And Lennox got knocked out by both of them, but he came back and avenged them defeats. And he's one of the greatest heavyweights ever. Remember before the second Wilder and Fury fight, who was the odd man out of all the UK uploaders? Beats. Oh, no way can Tyson Fury go on the front foot and beat Deontay Wilder. Well, how else is he going to beat him? Unless he tries. Unless he mixes it up. And he was so positive that these were going to be his tactics. People thought he was bluffing. No, he's not bluffing. He's serious. Now, I'm reminded, in defense of Tyson Fury, why he hates Britain. Because, let's face it, a lot of his fan base didn't appear until the first Wilder fight. And the second fight, where he changed up his tactics, they was all over it. But who fucked up his first fight? His coach. His coach fucked it up. He was too much of a fan of Tyson Fury and just too British in some ways in his mentality to think, yo, let's knock out this skinny-legged guy who's got a bit of a right hand. It took Freddie Roach, who in contrast to Dave Coldwell, Freddie used to be a pro. And he was just about as limited as Dave. The difference was Freddie contracted Parkinson's because of his reckless abandon in the way he fought. So Freddie knows you might get a little neurological complications, but sometimes you can't always finesse your way through. Sometimes you've got to knock your man out. The light bulb switched on for Tyson Fury when post-fight Freddie observed that he wasn't fighting inside. Why didn't you fight him inside? And a lot of and even Americans, but it was mainly the Brits. Oh, Freddie Roach don't know what he's talking about. Ben Davison done a wonderful job. And I was adamant that no, he didn't. No, he didn't. Now look, I'm not going to come and shit on Ben Davison. He did okay for a young guy who probably doesn't have an in-depth knowledge of the heavyweight division historically. He did okay, but no more than that. When you look at boxing history, when the people behind the scenes were really corrupt, that's when the struggle, and that's when and where you get the best fights and fighters and resumes. You can go from the coloured heavyweight champions from the 18th century till 1937. You got the mob. When they ran boxing, they got disbanded in the 60s. You could go to the 70s, 80s. You had some street dudes in there like Don King. You had people working for him like Al Braverman. And there was no easy rides for fighters, you know what I mean? There was no easy rides. There was a lot of corruption. Like Don King had a tournament on ABC in the 70s. There was a lot of things wrong with it. Like Marvin Hagler beat the likes of Johnny Baldwin, and Baldwin was in the tournament and Hagler wasn't, because basically he wouldn't sign with Don King. There was one boxer in the tournament who was inactive for a long time. And then when he had a spot in the tournament, all of a sudden fights that he never fought appeared on his resume. Wins to pad up his record. When Alex Waller, who worked for ABC, exposed a lot of what was going wrong, Al Braverman, a trainer and manager who worked for Don King, he was threatening him on some mob shit. These guys ain't no joke. Al Braverman, he managed Chuck Wepner, white guy, quite a big heavyweight, but he was limited. He got knocked out by Foreman in 3. I don't know if it was a knockout or stoppage. Buster Mathis beat him, but he had more wins than losses. And they pitched him in there with Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston, this was the last fight Sonny would ever fight before he mysteriously died. And Sonny beat him up, but he went the 9 rounds and took his lumps. He was overmatched like he was in a lot of them fights. They asked Sonny after, is Wepner the bravest man you've ever seen? And he said, no. His manager is the bravest. Talking about Al Braverman. Chuck Wepner was saying every time Liston hit him, he could hear his bones crunch. Something would break every time he was hit. The blood started splashing the people ringside watching the fight. It was a beating. That Rambo jab was doing much damage. But that's just how it was. You got pushed in hard. You know what I mean? He could have said no. They wouldn't have worked with him no more. Don't know. Someone like Braverman, you say no, that you're not going to take the fight. Who knows what could happen to you? Who knows? But, when you look at Chuck Wepner, a no-hoper, what was born off that? Rocky. Sylvester Stallone was inspired to make Rocky after watching the no-hoper Chuck Wepner challenge Muhammad Ali for the title. And he's even got a knockdown registered. But he stepped on Ali's foot, hit him to the body, and Ali went down. Ali got mad after that because he was clowning around. And he stopped him in the 15th. And that's the story Sylvester Stallone based Rocky on. He tried to cut Wepner out of the deal and not pay him anything, but eventually they settled out of court and Wepner got something. I haven't had enough time to finish these videos as quick as I wanted to, and because of that, I've been able to edit this one. And Don Charles made a video on Boxing Social saying, yeah, he fancies Derek against Wilder. And unlike Dave Coldwell, regardless if Derek beats him or not, Don had all these reasons why he thought Derek could do something, why he could put up a fight, why he could win. He spoke about all the defensive drills that he put Derek through because, like he said, he's the inventor of what Derek knows about boxing. He's the inventor. They didn't just randomly be able to give Vitaly Klitschko a hard fight, arguably beat Robert Helenius in Finland. These ain't just random things. Like Manny Stewart pulled Vladimir out because he didn't like the look in Derek's eye. You can say, yeah, Derek comes up short at elite level. I'm not going to disagree. But how elite is Wilder as a champion? Who is it he's beat to make him this elite guy? World class, yeah. But how elite? There's a difference between world class and elite, like LaRon Richards was saying today. The resume, that's not an elite resume. Eye test, yes, he has an elite right hand. I will say that. Even though a lot of his opponents have been low quality, he does have an elite right hand. But are you telling me that's an elite heavyweight fighter? Don said he hasn't seen the Joseph Parker rematch, and he said all the time he worked with Derek in the gym, he was never down in sparring, never. The only 2 times he saw him on the floor was against David Haye and the Dillian White loss. That's the only 2 times. And that's quite remarkable considering the resume of fighters he's fought. He doesn't have that fear that a lot of people have. And he has enough marquee value that he can challenge Wilder. But with all this British media and fan base just writing it off, it's just like absolutely crazy. Boxing is about challenging the odds. That's what it's about. Or what is it about? You learn how to box to defend yourself. Now, one of these scenarios is going to come about when you're defending yourself. It's when you're threatened. You don't use it when you're not threatened. You use it in dangerous situations. Derek trains for dangerous situations. He's not training for an easy life in the ring. The reason why people are so repulsed against the likes of Chisora challenging themselves is because they don't know what a throwback fighter is. They were trying to call Michael Hunter a throwback fighter, and I was telling them, you don't know what you're talking about. You clearly don't know what a throwback fighter is. This is what I was trying to school them. They was calling Keith Thurman a throwback fighter. Talented, but he's not a throwback fighter. I'll have to probably do a part 2, but British boxing and the success it's had is not based on us having as much elite skilled fighters as America. Our success has come of challenging the odds. Whether it's Tommy Farr coming up short against Joe Louis, but nevertheless making that challenge when the board didn't believe in him and giving Joe an excellent fight. Whether it's Randolph Turpin against Sugar Ray Robinson at Earl's Court, that's the greatest fighter that ever lived in many people's opinion. What was his record at the time? Depends on what record you go to. He was, 90 odd fights unbeaten? He had been beaten before by Jake LaMotta, but after that he went on a 90 plus fight unbeaten run, and Randy Turpin beat him. Johnny Owen going out to LA to fight Luke Pintor. Crazy in retrospect now. In his autopsy we found out that he had an abnormally thin skull. He got killed in there, but he challenged. The Murphy Matchstick from Wales. Quiet, shy guy. They say he didn't even have a girlfriend, but he went over there with a heart of a lion. And yeah, Luke Pintor is a Hall of Famer. That's what Battling Siki, first African champion, said about the Brits, because he was in the French army and they used to have boxing matches, I guess, outside the tavern or fights. And he says one thing about the Brits, they don't back down, and if they get beaten up, they're still very sporting. Nigel Benn against Mini Mike Tyson, Gerald McClellan. They thought Nigel was going to get killed, literally. Thought he was going to get killed in there. You brought him over to bash me up, post fight, yeah. Gerald McClellan has been incapacitated ever since that fight. People talk about that fight, but they forget about the Iran Barkley fight. He went over to Atlantic City. He was partly promoted by Bob Arum and knocked out Barkley in a round, 3 knockdown rule. Knocked out Doug DeWitt in America for the WBO title. If we lose that element of British boxing, and I'm not talking about sending Eddie the Eagle to fall off the ramp. I'm talking about guys who are going to try and win, you know? Even if they're up against a Terence Crawford or a Gennady Golovkin or a Usyk or a Canelo, they're going to go for it. And they're going to prep hard and they're going to go for it. They're not going to let themselves down. They're not going to let the country down. If we lose that, it's over. It's over for us. Back your Derek Chisoras. Make sure you back your Derek Chisoras.